thank you. So we're on Nun Hey Amid Aleph, Eruvin. Chayda Damar Avdimi Bar Chava Bar Dois of Ma'idich Siv Lova Shamayim Hi. Below Me'ever Layami. Torah is not in heaven, and it's not across the ocean. Lova Shamayim Hi, Shim Shamayim Hi, Ata Tzarech Lalos Achreo. It's not in heaven, but if it was in heaven, you'd have to go up to heaven to get it. You'd have to go across the ocean to get it. You won't find Torah in somebody who's haughty, who raises himself up as if he's in Shamayim. Or somebody who thinks he knows everything, like the breath of the water. Somebody who's haughty or arrogant, you're not going to find Torah. Business people, people who sell in the city. That means that if you're too much in business, you're not going to have time to study Torah. You have to be nira ve'eno nira. You got to spend a lot of your time not seen by the public in order to acquire the Torah that's required. Torah Bono.
Yeah, the Rambam has a halacha about that, by the way. So he says, "Lo b'shamayim layam."
Right. Einat Torah mitzvah b'mi shemar b'be'esek. Person who's occupied in businesses, you're not going to find Torah. The person should minimize how much time he spends doing business. That's a psak halacha in the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah and Sefer Ramada. Torah Bona. Ketzad Mabrim Esarim. How did we square off the cities in order to make an eruv that's equal 2,000 hours on each side? Arucha kamoshehi. If it's rectangular, you leave it the way it's rectangular. You measure 2,000 amas from each side. Agula, oisin lo zavias. If it's round, you place a square around the circle, right? And you circumscribe the square. That means you put the circle in the square, and you make your 2,000 amas from the sides of each square. Mirubos, if it's square. So that's it. You make 2,000 amas from each side. Which a rectangle. Rashi says, "Kishabal lindon atachton lo arev eitz l'kenem arav is droimis ena moedi min achayma alamarchi gomoshik l'maravad keneged toidish l'ken." Like you square it off. And then you make the 2,000 from the square. Let's say one house extends beyond the city. You draw a line, so you extend the city to the outermost part of that house. So you come in keshes. Keshes is like a rainbow, a half circle. And there's no city, there's no houses within the the convexity of the rainbow, or you make it like a gamma. A gamma is a Greek letter that looks like
an R.
Yeah, like a backwards dalid, I would say, backwards dalid. You fill it up as if it's a square. Okay, that's the Baraisa. We're going to analyze the Baraisa. Amar Arucha kamoishihi. So if it's longer on one side, you leave it. Pshita. So lo tzricha darikuk tina. That if it's long on one and short on the other. Ma'am say at least lo pusya orcha kamash malon. That no. You don't have to make it square. You just draw the 2,000 amas from each side. If it's square, you just measure from the square. Pshita, well, of course. Let's say it's like a diamond instead of a square. Can you fill in a square around a diamond and add those corners? Right? No, you just measure from the diamond 2,000 amas from each side. It's still going to be a square, but it won't be a square like when you look at it from a sky view. It'll look like a diamond. Now, if we draw a line along the one house, then certainly around two houses, it's the same. Would there be any shayla about two houses? The chiddush is you have one house sticking out on one side, on the south, and one house sticking out on the north. Maybe we don't draw a line on both sides of the city. Kamashman that we do. You extend the city by the house that extends on either side. Like we say, if you have a rainbow, so it depends. Right? You have a half circle. So it's got to be with less than 4,000 amas between the two arms of the half circle. Then you can, as if you fill up the middle part with houses, fine. And each one gets to measure from when you draw a line between, like a bowstring, which would fill in the bow, you draw 2,000 amas from there. Everybody, even if you live within the city, far away from there, you get 2,000 amas from there. However, in Lav, then wherever your house is, inside of it, if it's more than 4,000 amas, then you measure 2,000 amas from each house. Let's say you have a city and the wall is broken, and not only is the wall broken, but then there's a division even among the houses. So there's a gap of 141 and a third. So we say if it's more than that, those two areas are viewed as two different cities. We're going to see why that is shortly. Because a karfet, which gets to be added to a city, is 70 by 70. So if you have two karfets, 70 by 70 is 140. So it's as if you've created two different cities. So you see, it's not 4,000 hours. That means if the gap doesn't go all the way through and through the city, then it remains a whole city. But if it's divided b'shtei ruchos, so it's a through and through gap, then it becomes like two cities. Umay kamash belon the noisten karfif fluzu that each city gets 70 by 70 amas, sort of as an addition to their city. Karf is like a corral. It's a fenced-in corral area for storage purposes. People would store wood there. Every city gets one of those, but two of them, so you don't get that. And therefore, if you have two of them, except you have a karfet for this city, a karfet for that, that's why you divide the city into two. But the Gemara says we've already learned that somewhere. Noistin karfet fleir. The Rameir already told us each city gets a karfet. The Chachamim rely on karfet felabein shtei ayaros. The Itmar Ravuna Amar karfet l'zu v'karfet l'zu. Each one gets its own. So why did I have to be told this halach again? Srich, I needed it. Yeshmin and Hachaf, I don't be told it in here. Mishum dablet tzad heter meikara. The city started off as a whole city. Then later on, there was an attack. It got a gap, but it started off as a heter. Aval Hassam, where they were built as two different cities with Karfeifim, Aim alone. Maybe we wouldn't say the same thing. Maybe one Karfeif is not enough for a city. But here, where there's a full opening in front of the city, maybe aim alone, and maybe we wouldn't say the same din. So tzrich, I needed to be told the din that you get a karfi from both places. So the kama have bein yesr lekeshes. There also has to be a measurement when you have a rainbow type of city. The houses inside the concavity, cannot be too far from the bowstring. What's the maximum difference? It's got to be within 2,000 amas for them to then use the heter of the bowstring that they can go 2,000 amas beyond there. But Rava Baravun Amr, I feel yes from Alpayim Mama. No, even if the distance was more, it would still work. Amr Abayi Kavesa the Rava Baravun Mistafra. There's a brisa like Rava Baravuna, which it could be more than Alpayim. The boy, Hadar Asay Derech Batim. You could always walk, for example, along the, when you have houses in a like a rainbow, instead of walking straight, you could walk along the houses. So it doesn't make a difference how far, even if it's more than 2,000 amas. Then the Mishnah said, let's say there were ruins on the outside of the city. You measure from the ruins. 3 walls without a ceiling. That's a gdudiyos. What about shtei mechitzas? What do you have? 2 walls and a ceiling. Would you measure from there or not? Toshma, the following extension of the city, you can use to measure from those, from the point, from the you draw a line including these areas beyond the city. Nefesh yesh ba'arbamis al arbamit. Nefesh is like a tomb, but they built a big a big house over it. That's 4 by 4. A gesher va'kever sheyesh ben beis dira, a bridge or a tomb that has a house attached with it. Somebody could sleep there. Ubeis hakneses sheyesh ba beis dira lachazin. The shamus gets there. There's a shul with a house connected to it that the shamus can sleep there. Ubeis avodas kachavim sheyesh ba beis dira lakumarim. Even a house of avodah zarah, where there's a house that the priests of the avodah zarah live in, that is considered a structure that you can measure the city from there. The urvis va'oitzish b'soides. You have granaries and silos. Sheyesh bohen beis dira, as long as they have an attached sort of cabin that somebody could sleep there. The harburginin shebesocha. These are like huts or teepees that were out in the field that people, the watchmen of the fields, would sleep there. This seems to be like a house built on an island. Let's say there's a body of water that extends beyond a city, and there's a house there. So these are all examples where you would measure from these areas further to 2,000 amas. The following are not considered areas that you would measure from those on 2,000 amas. You have a tomb, but it's been divided into, there's a gap between the area. A bridge or a tomb that doesn't have a place to sleep. A shul doesn't have a place for the shamas to sleep. And Beis Avodah Zarah that doesn't have a house for the priests. Granaries and silos that don't have a place to sleep in. Ubor v'siach u'ma'ara. These are water cisterns or a cave. The gutter v'shovach or a fence, or a birdhouse, or a bayish b'sfina, like a boathouse, a house on a boat. Let's say the city had a dock, and there were houseboats. That's too. It moves around, so you can't measure from there as part of the city. Ein elam misabrim imo. Ktani mia. Whatever you want to say comes out that nefesh and nefesh mishtei ruchosech elu ve'elu. You had a kever that was divided in two. That seems to be a case of two walls with a ceiling. My love, the iketikra, and therefore we have an answer to our question. What about two mechitzas that have a tikra? So the Gemara says, lo deleka tikra. That's no riot from there because the nefesh that was broken up is an example where it didn't have a ceiling. If it had a ceiling, maybe you could measure from there. Then by Shabayam Lamai Chozi. Now, this house that's on an island, what is that for? It was like a where they offloaded boats of their goods and they stored it there, like a warehouse that when they unload the boats, they store things there. But that's not enough. Since it doesn't have a base dira, you wouldn't measure from there. What a cave. You don't measure from there. We have another brisa in the name of Rav Chia that the cave, people do live in caves, and therefore it should be considered part of the city. There's a house connected to the cave. That means at the opening of the cave, there's a structure. Then in a chanami, you would measure from there. Why isn't the cave itself considered a binyan? We're talking about a small. That means a house has to be at least arbal arba. So if the cave was not arbal arba, and you had a smaller cave, but then you built a house attached to it that makes it arbal arba, then it would be midstar. That's the chiddush there. But in a chanami, if the cave was big enough, that would be okay. On Ravuna, people who lived in these tents, not tents, like a teepee or a hut, that they're made out of straw and aravois, and they're out in the field. So you don't count their tchum from like the people who live in the city. They get 2,000 amas from where they live. It has nothing to do with the city. Mostly Rav Chizda, it says that Klal Yisrael, vayachanu al Yarden mi beis hayeshimos, that when they came to Arvos Moav, they dwelled on the Jordan in beis hayeshimos ad evel hashitim ba'arvos Moav. He saw that area. The Havi plus a parsi al plus a parsi. It was 3 parsa. That's a 3 parsa is 12 mil. So it was an area of 12 mil by 12 mil. The Tanya. Now,
And how big is 12 mil?
A mil is a kilometer.
Okay.
So
12 kilometers
1.6 kilometer, you're talking about, you're talking about 6 miles. Right? 5-6 miles. So the Bnei Yisrael's encampment was 5 by 5 miles. 12 mil by 12 mil. That's for 3 million people. That's pretty dense. It's pretty dense. Remember, Los Angeles is 450 square miles. That's like 20 by 20 by 20 miles. I mean, from here to downtown is 5 miles. And let's say from the mountains to the Santa Monica freeway is 5 miles. So, I mean, it's a pretty big area. You had 3 million people.
Area.
Huh?
It's a big area. They were living in sukkahs.
Right.
They weren't
but
big.
still but Walter, 3 million people. Los Angeles has 3 million people.
So Greater Los Angeles has much more than 3 million.
No, but the city of Los Angeles, not the greater Los Angeles, has 3 million people. But that includes parts of the valley and east. So that means putting 3 million people between downtown and here and the mountains and the Santa Monica freeway, that's a lot of people. That's very dense. That's not that big of an area.
When people needed to see Moshe Rabbeinu, they had to walk 5 miles sometimes, or 4 miles.
Well, Walter, listen to what the Gemara is going to say right now. Kishehe nifnin, when they had to go to the bathroom, so the Torah told us, they actually had to leave the camp. So if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to walk outside the camp, behind you. So the Gemara is asking, if it's Shabbos, and you're telling me the camp is 12 mil, and the 2,000 amas, right, 1,000 amas is 1 mil. So they had to walk more than a tchum to go to the bathroom. You're trying to bring me a raya from Diglei Midbar? Kivan dichsibu al pi Hashem yachnuv al pi Hashem yisou keman dekvilu hudami. You can't call the temporary structures they lived in Borgnin, since they encamped based on Hashem. It's as if it was a regular city, and therefore that whole area was considered one city. You could walk anywhere in that area, and 2,000 amas beyond it. So it's not a problem that they only had 2,000 amas from their individual hut. The whole area was considered one kavua place, like one city. Now they still have to go to the bathroom that way, but it wasn't a problem that they were walking beyond more than their personal tchum, because they were allowed to walk outside the city. The whole city is they're able to walk the whole place.
Maybe on Shabbos they got a miracle like the man, they didn't have to go to the bathroom.
If where the Burganim were, they also had chatzeros with 2 batim open up in the chatzeros, that establishes kviyas. And then that could create a larger space to be considered part of the city. People who lived in these huts, or people who traveled in the midbar, they don't have any kind of life, and their wives and children are not theirs. We're going to see, because it's such a dangerous way of living, that their women would be attacked by strange men because they were not there to defend them, and therefore their wives were not theirs and their children were not theirs. It's like living in a grave. And they are subject to the elements, to the hurricanes, to the rain, to the winds. Why my time? Also, they were like animals because they didn't have bathhouses, and therefore their wives were always committing adultery because there were no men there. The men were always looking to go find a place to wash, and when the men would go find a place to wash, other men would come and molest their wives. Rav Yochanan Rav Nesha Margishin Zelazeh B'Tvila. There were no mikvahs. The women had to go to a far place to go to the mikvah. The neighbors would, the women would walk in groups, right? Rashi says, Kor lechaverto margish nashchenim, right? The women to go to the mikvah, they would walk with groups of women. The neighbors would know, and then a Russia would run after them and have yichud with them. And like we say, even with two women, you shouldn't have yichud because the women will still go along with znus. Now, what's the difference between the two reasons of Einlan Mechatzos or B'nei Margishin? The example would be if there was a river close by. So then they could go to the mikveh, but there would still be a problem for the men. The men would want to go to a bathhouse. The men would leave and spend a lot of time away from their wives. Then would lead also to adultery. A city doesn't have a lot of vegetables. Chacham cannot live there because vegetables is a good food and nutritious food. It is cheap. And therefore, he could live an easy life as a Talmid Chacham. Because we just said if you spend too much time doing business, you're not going to have enough time to gather Torah knowledge to be a Talmid Chacham. So live in a city that has a lot of vegetables. Vegetables are cheap. They're very nourishing. And therefore, that's why you should live in that kind of city. There are three kinds of food that make you have to go to the bathroom more. But make you bent over. And it takes away 1/500th of your sight. Eluhain, pas kibber, like bread made out of not fine flour. Sheikhar, beer, new beer, not aged, and v'yerek, and vegetables. You see, vegetables are not good. So it says lo kasha, depends. We'll see what we learn tomorrow. So tomorrow